sometime in early December, we got word that we were going overseas. They did not tell us where, but the Ouija board did. One of the people in my platoon was a great Ouija board fan. So every night we would sit down and we'd ask all these questions of where we were going. And of course, the answer that came up most often was we were going to Norway. And then we shipped out, and as we were leaving, a pretty Red Cross girl gave us a cup of coffee as we were getting on the boat. And we got the donut to go with it at the other end 9 or so days later. And when we were about half or 2/3 of the way to where we were going, they told us where we were going. We arrived in Naples. We were transferred onto an LST, which carried us up the coast to Leghorn. And from Leghorn, we trucked to Pisa, where we had a camp. We were in Pisa 4 or 5 days before we were moved to the front. It was an enjoyable time, and again, I was having a great time and everything, seeing the world. But the whole country is a beautiful country, and if you're going to fight a war, I guess that's the best place to fight it. We crossed the line of departure at 11 o'clock at night to take Mount Belvedere, and the path we went up was heavily, heavily booby-trapped. We were instructed not to fire any shots. The element of surprise was one of the big factors. However, the Germans were firing at us, but also once in a while somebody would step on a mine and you'd hear the yell of medic, medic, medic. And it was a terrible sound. And then the Germans had some wonderful equipment from their standpoint. They had a burp gun. And a burp gun, because it just sounded like a burp gun. Burp, burp, burp. It was a fast-firing gun that was quite dangerous. They had 88 cannons. So all through the war, they were shooting at us with those damn things. They sound like a freight train. You can hear a shell coming. If you don't hear it, that's the one that gets you. It's that one that you don't hear that is the one that's aimed right at you. We finally arrived at the top, or close to the top of Belvedere at 4:20 a.m. in the morning. It was just getting daylight, and we were digging in. My partner, again, was Fred Burmester, FCB, my old campmate. We just got that hole dug when this German 88 started shooting in. It was zipped right over our head and landed about 10 feet down the hill below us. Fred looked at me and he says, boy, he says, on that one I'm going to have a cigarette. And I said, me too. Daylight came. By this time, many, many Germans were starting to surrender. But as we looked around too, we could see bodies, not only of Germans, but of our own troops that had been shot. It was a difficult night. We had a lot of casualties. Fortunately, as years go on, you remember the light side of the war, the keen side. In the back of your mind, you know a lot of the things that happened that were bad, but you really put those out of your mind. You really remember the good things, the good times you had, the good buddies you made. One young man gave up to me. I went through his billfold, and in his billfold there was a picture of his family, a picture of his girlfriend. And I think maybe that's the first time I realized that a young German wasn't any different than we were, and probably just as naive as we were about what was going on and why he was there. But it really was kind of a shocking thing to realize that somebody, only thing, the difference between us was that he spoke a different language. We quickly learned that the next thing to a good bath was a dry pair of socks. I always carried a pair of socks right next to my tummy. I would tuck them in my belt, and so I always had a nice dry pair of socks. In this big flat valley, open, wide valley, the beautiful Po Valley. And I dug a foxhole. I was one of the very few that dug a foxhole. And all of a sudden, we started getting German AK explosive. That they would explode about 10 feet above the ground, a very, very severe, dangerous kind of a shell. And anyway, I dove into my foxhole, and Don Kent, who was right there, says, "Can I join you?" And I said, "You certainly can, as long as you lay on top." We poked our heads up, and everybody was gone. There wasn't a soul around. We didn't know where they went. The Germans had blown up the bridge. And so we were waiting for rubber rafts to cross the pole. By this time, it was evening, and we didn't know what to do, but we found a covered pigsty, and we spent the night in the pigsty. When we found K Company, nobody had had a bath, nobody had brushed their teeth for days and days, and Martin Brucey, we called Goose, who was our sergeant, had a toothbrush, and we all borrowed his toothbrush, so we called it 17 Men on a Toothbrush.